Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 354 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Flying into the UK after my break, it was noticeable just how dry the countryside looks. We desperately need some rain. My immediate thoughts were, had the wasps destroyed my colonies? And was there any honey from our trip to the Borage? Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. This week's podcast is brought to you, in part, by Hive 5 Multi-Guard. So,
when you need a little peace of mind that your bees are safe from dangers of all kind, pesticides, hornets, wasps and mice are no match for Hive 5. The Hive 5 Multi-Guard is the best one in town. Keeps your bees safe all year round. The ultimate solution has been found. It's Hive 5.
The Hive 5 Multi-Guard fits nearly all beehives and makes beekeeping much easier. Hive 5.
hi everyone, I'm back from my holiday and I was going to say excited to get back into the beekeeping, but maybe the word should have been nervous. Certainly I have been feeling a little unsure as to what I might find, particularly as the flight home took me directly over the area that our honeybees have been set out for the borage pollination. Just quickly, if you're not listening to this as a Patreon subscriber, you're getting the podcast about 4 weeks after its original release. I've had a couple of questions on YouTube about the delay in release, and so, to catch up with the very latest podcast, pop over to my Patreon page and sign up to the Podcast Plus subscription. So, 2 weeks away from the UK, and actually it was already looking like the season was well ahead of itself before I left for the USA. I had a fantastic time visiting my youngest daughter and her husband, but couldn't help checking on the local UK weather and, of course, the various messages that popped up on my mobile phone while I was away, particularly regarding the wasps and how dry it's been. So, today is Saturday the 19th of July, and it's been raining. We had quite a number of showers pass through the overnight period and early this morning, but it's all been starting to dry up again as I'm recording this podcast. The weather impacts so much of what we do as beekeepers, and I have a long list of areas that this current situation has impacted. More about the effect the weather is having as I go through today's podcast, so let's crack on with it. First up, the quick whiz round the local apiaries to check in on the nukes that we'd created a few weeks back, and obviously my concerns about what's been happening with those regarding the wasps in particular. These are set up as either 14 by 12 or Langstroth nukes, and having suffered severe autumn losses to wasps not so long ago, I was really quite concerned that the early season was going to impact these nukes while I was away, and that the wasps would eventually find them, attack them, and I'd lose another large percentage of these colonies. All that hard work and expense gone in a very short period of time perhaps. The first location we visited this last week was the allotment apiary, and sure enough, wasps were present in very high numbers. At this apiary, I have around 20, or I should say I had around 20 nucleus colonies, and the wasps had targeted a couple of the smaller populations, and, well, they were pretty much decimating them. It's always a challenge deciding what to do for the best in this situation. The choice I made was to leave everything as it was, and here's why. Of the 20 or so nucleus colonies, only 2 were the focal point of all of the wasps in the apiary, and by all of the wasps I mean hundreds if not thousands. The 2 nucleus colonies were totally overrun, and beyond the point that really I was able to do anything to help. Food stores within the boxes were pretty much gone. One actually turned out to be a drone-laying queen, so I would have had to have done something with them anyway. Removing them from the apiary may have been an option, but where then do the wasps go? Well, they'll look for the next weakest colony and start attacking that one. So, in leaving the situation as it was, I was able to provide perhaps a little safety net for the other colonies. The first job here was to move around each nuke and close the entrances to just a single bee space. Just thinking on that, it seems incredibly early to be closing down entrances to protect against wasps, even for nukes. I would normally be anticipating growing colonies, frames of foundation being drawn out, and summer nectar being stored away in these nukes for winter food stores. But no, the conditions right now are such that we're feeding these nukes. The bees are simply shutting down weeks upon weeks earlier than normal. By this, I mean workers are loitering around the entrance to their colony, protecting themselves from wasps and robbing. A lack of forage means there are far fewer bees heading out to bring back nectar and pollen, and actually, in several colonies, queens were laying very few eggs. It's an important point. Don't panic if you see a much smaller number of eggs in frames right now. It's mostly the bees self-regulating the size of the colony with the available food resources. As ever, I feel lucky to have the number of colonies I have, and that allows some movement in what I'm doing, which actually really isn't a great deal. In terms of inspections, it was very much a quick look for food and eggs, then close them down quickly again. Wasps have a very keen sense of when beekeepers open their hives and are very quickly in them. If you're inspecting and you do have a wasp issue, keep those inspections as short as possible. I'm feeding blocks of fondant to the nukes. A couple of reasons for this. First up, I have a lot of fondant still, so why buy in more sugar at high prices? And secondly, it's very quick to add and there is absolutely no chance of spillages. With syrup, the slightest amount spilt means an almost instant response from wasps and robbing bees. If you're already adding syrup, just be very careful and wash down any spillages quickly. Here at the allotment apiary, all of the other colonies were enjoying a distinct lack of wasp attention. I did find a couple that appeared to be queenless, but that could also be down to a lack of forage and a brood break situation perhaps, so I'm not panicking just yet. Worst case scenario with these is to unite them later in the autumn. Over at the paddock apiary, I was surprised by the lack of wasps. I think I spotted maybe half a dozen in all the time that we were there, and the splits that we had made and introduced queens into were all doing very nicely. Just thinking about the current shutdown colonies are experiencing, it's quickly obvious as you'll see a lot of bees loitering at the entrance, and that can be at any time of the day. For me, it was early afternoon, very warm, a little humid maybe, but sunny intervals, yet there were far too many bees clustering at the entrances, and actually they kind of looked like how I feel after a prolonged period in hot sunny weather, a little bit exhausted. I'm sure it's a sign that there isn't much forage around for them, and they're protecting the entrances against wasps and robbers. Not what we want to see in mid-July, but actually I'm happy to see that they're easily able to protect themselves at the entrance. Again, I added blocks of fondant to all of these nucleus colonies. Hopefully this will give them something to use to build comb, store some food, and maybe just get the queen laying again in these colonies that have slowed down. Finally, the fishing lakes apiaries. This was the one I was most concerned about, given my previous experiences that we've had at these locations. It's always been a great place for wasps and hornets to live because of the sandy soil type, where aggregates have been previously excavated, leaving piles of soft sand for wasps to nest in. Actually, at the first sight, not many wasps at all. And actually, even though I had chosen to leave entrances wide open for my trip abroad, these nukes were being left alone. The only thing to do was to add some foam to reduce those entrances. The bees were out foraging, mainly I guess on remnants of rosebay willow herb and currently drifts of Himalayan balsam that run alongside the river. Actually, that seems very, very early as well, so there was a little food coming in for them. As I say, that balsam seems incredibly early this year. Maybe it's just me, but perhaps it's also nationwide. At the other apiary site here, I had inadvertently set up a wasp attractant, and there were hundreds of them, all focused on one small part of the apiary. Let me explain. So prior to taking the bees to the Borage, we set up a very defensive colony from this apiary ready to go. You'll no doubt remember the video on Patreon. Originally, this colony had a couple of very old brood boxes on it, and the bees had stored quite a lot of food in them during that spring period. I figured I could use these to boost smaller colonies as we moved forward, and had them stacked in the apiary, securely blocked off, or so I thought. What's happened is that the wasps have chewed through the foam block at the entrance and made a hole about the size of a bee space. Well, actually, it's about the size of a wasp space, which seems incredibly small, but they're piling in and out. It seems like thousands of them, actually, a black cloud of wasps all surrounding these two brood boxes. The happy side effect of this is that the wasps have left the nukes in this apiary completely alone and ignored, favouring to rob out these two unguarded brood boxes. You know, I'll happily sacrifice the honey inside these two brood boxes to keep my nucleus colonies safe right now. Again, entrances were closed down, creating a bottleneck which will prevent any wasps getting inside for sure. These nukes were again shutting themselves down. Not many bees foraging, more bees sat outside the entrance protecting them. Out of all the nukes and small colonies we had in these apiaries, we've only lost 2 to wasps, so I count that as a success so far. This left just the bees on the edge of the pumpkins and borage to check in on, and we did that yesterday, so that's Friday. Check out the latest video on Patreon to see exactly what happened. Otherwise, here's the spoiler for the video. It wasn't too bad after all. Here's how the calendar looked for the past month. I prepared the colonies to go to the Borage and took them down for the last week of June. We loaded the strongest colonies with what I would call extra space, maybe a glimmer of hope and expectations that these colonies would outperform all the others and bring back the greater share of the honey crop. The smaller colonies were given what I'd call appropriate space, maybe 2 or 3 supers, based on what we've seen in the past on the borage crops. Entrances were opened wide to give a full width entrance on all of the hives, and the 3 biggest also had top entrances set up by turning over the honey pour roofs. 3 weeks later, and what did I find? Well, firstly, the positive stuff. None of the colonies were weakened by wasp attacks, despite hearing of the many beekeepers having struggles with these wasps. I was so relieved to see that there were no losses here to the wasps, as we have had challenges in previous seasons. All of the colonies are alive and all appear to be okay. I've not inspected them as yet, but all the signs are that none of them have swarmed. By that I mean there appears to be plenty of bees at the entrances and within the supers. I also don't think the conditions have been such that colonies will have swarmed, but time will tell when I visit next week and carry out what I'd call proper inspections on all of these colonies. Fingers crossed until then. Now for the not so good news. The honey crop, it's very poor indeed. The borage actually looked stunted in terms of the height of the plants. They seemed maybe a couple of feet shorter than normal. That said, they had all produced a lot of flowers. They were flowering the week that we took the bees down, so maybe that should have been an indication to me of what to expect. I guess we maybe have a third of what we might have normally expected to get in terms of honey. This could change in the next week as these showers and sometimes heavy rain that is anticipated hits those fields. It may possibly boost the nectar flow in these last remaining few flowers that the plants have. Borage will just continue to flower, but in much smaller numbers. So maybe, just maybe, we might get an end of the summer nectar flow from them. Again, fingers crossed. It was noticeable, just like the nucleus colonies back home, that these colonies had shut down. Bees appeared lethargic at the entrances, and I suspect that many of them will probably have smaller amounts of eggs being laid right now. The season feels well and truly over from the perspective of a honey crop, especially as we're not heading to the heather moors this year. Finally, I'm having second thoughts about queen rearing right now. My intention was to get back off holiday and get a cloak board hive set up, but I'm really concerned that smaller mating nukes might well simply be targets for wasps and robbing, and any work I do in developing queen cells will be undone by predation and starvation. So I'm really close to calling it on the queen rearing for this year and just starting to plan for next season already. Let me know how you've been getting on this summer, how you're dealing with the wasps, and if honey production has been good for you. Well, that's it for this week. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,600 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible. No waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2025 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey. Head over to Google and search for Patreon and the Norfolk Honey Company.